What if Charlie Hudson isn't really gone? For months, fans of Hudson and Rex have been asking the same question. Could John Reardon return as Charlie Hudson in season 9? And now, with the new season approaching, that question has become even more interesting. Rumors, fan theories, the change in the show's lead, and the silence surrounding Charlie's future have created one massive possibility. What if season 9 has been hiding a surprise? But before we go any further, there's something important you need to know. There is no verified leaked footage proving that John Reardon is back. There is no confirmed trailer showing Charlie Hudson's return. What we're talking about today is a theory built from the public information surrounding the cast change, fan reactions, and the possibilities the writers could explore. Because if Charlie really did return, even for a short appearance, it could completely change the emotional direction of season 9. And the biggest question isn't just whether Charlie comes back, it's what Rex would do when he sees him again. The biggest change heading into season 9 is impossible to ignore. Charlie Hudson, the detective fans had followed for years, is no longer at the center of the story in the same way. Instead, the series has introduced Luke Roberts as Mark Hudson, Charlie's brother, stepping into the role and becoming Rex's new human partner. On paper, it makes sense. A long-running show needs to keep moving forward, and introducing a new lead can give the story a fresh direction. But Hudson and Rex is not just another police procedural. Its emotional center has always been the relationship between a detective and his K-9 partner. Charlie and Rex were not simply co-workers. Their connection became one of the main reasons audiences stayed with the series. That is why Charlie's absence feels bigger than a normal cast change. For longtime viewers, watching Rex build a new relationship with Mark was never going to be completely simple. Some fans may be ready to accept Mark as the new lead. Others may still feel that something is missing. And that emotional divide is exactly where the Charlie return theory begins. Imagine for a moment that the writers wanted to surprise everyone. They wouldn't necessarily need to announce John Reardon's return months in advance. In fact, keeping something like that quiet would make the reveal far more powerful. The audience could spend the early part of season 9 believing the story has completely moved on. Mark is now working with Rex. The cases continue. The team adjusts. Everyone starts accepting the new reality. And then something happens. A small clue. A familiar sound. A name that hasn't been spoken in a long time. Or perhaps Rex reacts to someone in a way that makes the audience stop and think. That is where this theory becomes interesting, because Rex could be the perfect character to reveal Charlie's return without saying a single word. The series has always used Rex's behavior as an important part of its emotional storytelling. He notices things humans miss. He reacts to danger. He recognizes people. And most importantly, his bond with the people around him can communicate emotions without needing a long explanation. So, in a completely hypothetical season 9 storyline, imagine Rex suddenly hearing something familiar, something connected to Charlie. At first, nobody understands why Rex is reacting differently. Mark might try to calm him down. The rest of the team might assume the dog has simply picked up a scent or noticed something unusual. But Rex knows. And if the audience knows what Rex knows, the suspense could become enormous. Because the question would no longer be, is Charlie coming back? It would become, when is Rex going to see him? Of course, this is where we need to separate theory from fact. Nothing about this hypothetical reunion should be treated as confirmed information. The idea comes from the possibilities created by the cast transition, and the reaction from fans who still want to see Charlie's story continue. But there is another reason the theory refuses to disappear. Mark Hudson. Mark isn't simply a replacement character who could be erased the moment Charlie returns. He has his own relationship with Rex. He has spent time learning how Rex works, understanding his behavior, and becoming part of the team. That means bringing Charlie back would create a much more complicated story than simply putting the old detective back in his chair. And honestly, that could make the return even more powerful. Because what happens when the person Rex once trusted most suddenly returns after Mark has already become his partner? Would Rex immediately choose Charlie? Would Mark feel threatened? Would Charlie expect everything to go back to the way it was? Or would all three have to find a completely new balance? That is the kind of conflict that could give season 9 an emotional storyline far beyond the usual case of the week format. And there is an even bigger possibility. What if Charlie's return isn't permanent? What if he appears only for one important case? What if his appearance is connected to something from his past? Or what if the writers use his return to give Charlie and Rex one final emotional moment before the story moves forward? That would allow the series to respect the new direction while still acknowledging the history that made Charlie and Rex so important to fans. And that may actually be the smartest way to handle a return. Because the strongest version of this theory isn't about replacing Mark. It's about forcing Mark to confront the one person nobody expected to see again, Charlie Hudson. And if that happens, Rex could find himself caught between the detective he has known for years and the detective who has slowly earned his trust. But there's one question that makes this theory even more interesting. If Charlie really is coming back, why would he return now? And the possible answer could change everything about Season 9. If Charlie Hudson really does return in Season 9, the writers would have one major challenge: making his comeback feel important without destroying everything that happened after he left. And that is where things could get very interesting, because Charlie couldn't simply walk back into the police station, smile at Rex, and start solving cases like nothing ever happened. A return that big would need a reason. It would need mystery, it would need emotional weight. Most importantly, it would need an explanation that makes fans look back at the story and wonder if the clues were there all along. One possible theory is that Charlie's absence could be connected to something much bigger than anyone realized. Maybe he didn't simply leave. Maybe there was unfinished business. Perhaps Charlie was pulled into a situation that forced him to stay away from the people closest to him. A dangerous investigation, a case that became too personal, something involving an old enemy or information that could put his family and colleagues at risk. Again, there is no confirmation that this is actually the story Season 9 will tell. This is purely a hypothetical direction. But from a drama writing perspective, it would give the writers a believable reason to keep Charlie away, while allowing his return to become a major mystery. And imagine how that mystery could unfold. At first, Mark could be investigating a completely different case. Nothing appears connected to Charlie. Rex is focused on the job. The team is moving forward. Then a clue appears. Maybe a name. Maybe an old file. Maybe information that doesn't make sense. Mark starts digging deeper, and suddenly he discovers something that makes him question what he thought he knew about Charlie's disappearance. That would create a powerful conflict, because Mark isn't just Charlie's replacement, he's Charlie's brother, so the investigation would become personal. The more Mark discovers, the more questions he would have. Why did Charlie disappear? Who knew about it? Why was nobody told the full story? And, most importantly, why would Charlie choose to stay away from Rex? That last question could become the emotional heart of the entire storyline, because Rex wouldn't understand secrets. He wouldn't understand why someone he trusted suddenly vanished. He would only know that Charlie was gone. And if Charlie suddenly returned, Rex's reaction could say more than any long speech ever could. But there is another possibility that could make the theory even more surprising. What if Charlie doesn't return at the beginning of the season? What if the writers wait? They could spend several episodes establishing Mark as Rex's partner. The audience would become comfortable with the new dynamic. Mark would have his own strengths, his own mistakes, and his own way of working with Rex. Then, just when viewers believe the Charlie chapter is completely finished, the story could introduce one unexpected connection. Suddenly, everything changes. That kind of delayed reveal would have a much bigger impact because the audience would have already accepted the new reality. And that brings us to the biggest emotional question of all. How would Mark react if Charlie suddenly appeared? At first, there might be relief, then confusion, then anger, because Mark wouldn't simply be meeting his brother again. He would be facing the man whose absence forced him into a role he never expected to fill. Mark has spent time building his own relationship with Rex. He has earned moments of trust. He has become part of the team. So if Charlie returns, Mark would have every reason to ask one question: where were you? That could lead to some of the most emotional conversations the series has ever had. Charlie might explain why he had to leave. Mark might not accept the explanation. Rex might be caught in the middle. And suddenly, the story would no longer be about which detective is better. It would be about trust. Who does Rex trust now? Who does Charlie trust? Can Mark and Charlie work together? And can the three of them find a way forward without pretending that nothing changed? That is why a Charlie Hudson return could actually make Mark's character more important, not less. A weaker storyline would erase Mark and pretend season 9 never happened. A stronger storyline would do the opposite. It would use everything Mark has experienced to make Charlie's return more complicated. Mark has learned how Rex thinks. He has developed his own style. He has created his own connection with the dog. And Charlie would have to understand that he can't simply claim his old position again. Rex isn't a piece of property, he's a partner. That could create a fascinating emotional triangle between Charlie, Mark, and Rex. And there is one moment fans would probably be waiting for more than anything else. The first time Charlie and Rex are alone together. No team, no case, no investigation, just Charlie and Rex. Would Rex immediately recognize him? Would he run toward him? Would he hesitate? Would he remember the bond they shared? A moment like that wouldn't even need much dialogue. The emotion would come from Rex's reaction. And if the writers wanted to make the audience question everything, they could delay Charlie's face reveal. Maybe viewers hear his voice first. Maybe Rex reacts before the audience sees who is standing there. Maybe Mark turns around and freezes. And then the reveal. Charlie Hudson. Back. But here's where the theory gets even more dangerous. Because if Charlie returns, fans will immediately ask another question. Is he back for good? And that answer could be far more complicated than anyone expects. A surprise appearance doesn't necessarily mean a full-time return. It could be one episode, it could be a short arc, it could be a flashback, a dream, or even a carefully designed misdirection. That's why every rumor surrounding Season 9 needs to be treated carefully. A dramatic trailer moment can make something look confirmed when it isn't. A mysterious shot can mean 10 different things. And fan theories can sometimes become so detailed that they start feeling like real spoilers. But that's exactly what makes this theory so entertaining. There is enough uncertainty for almost anything to happen. And if the writers really wanted to shock the audience, they could use that uncertainty against us. They could make fans believe Charlie is returning, only to reveal something completely different. Or they could do the opposite. They could spend weeks letting everyone believe the return is impossible, and then bring him back when nobody expects it. Either way, there is one thing Season 9 cannot escape. Charlie Hudson's legacy is still part of the story. And if John Reardon really does return, even briefly, that legacy could suddenly become the biggest mystery of the entire season. But there is still one final piece of the puzzle. What would Charlie's return actually mean for Rex? And could it change the future of the entire team? If Charlie Hudson really returns in Season 9, the biggest impact may not come from Charlie himself. It may come from Rex, because Rex has always been at the center of this story. Charlie was his partner. Mark is now his partner. And if Charlie suddenly comes back, Rex becomes the one character who connects both chapters of the series. That is what makes the possibility so emotional. Imagine Rex seeing Charlie again after everything that happened. There would be no need for a huge explanation at first. Rex's reaction could tell the audience everything. Recognition, confusion, excitement, maybe even hesitation. Because while fans may remember Charlie instantly, Rex would have his own emotional response. And that could make the reunion feel completely different from a normal character return. But there is another question. What happens to Mark? Mark has spent an entire season proving that he can work with Rex. He has built trust with him. He has faced dangerous situations with him. He has become part of the team. So Charlie's return would not erase that history. Instead, it could force Mark to decide what kind of detective he wants to be. Does he see Charlie as competition? Does he welcome his brother back? Or does he realize that Charlie's return gives him a chance to finally understand the man whose shadow he has been living under? That could create an emotional storyline between the brothers that fans never expected. And perhaps the most interesting version would not have Charlie immediately taking control. Maybe Charlie understands that things have changed. Maybe he sees Mark working with Rex and realizes that Rex has another partner now. That could create a quiet but powerful moment. Charlie doesn't have to be angry. Mark doesn't have to be jealous. Instead, both brothers could recognize that Rex has moved forward, and that would make the story feel much more realistic. Because time changes people. It changes relationships, and it changes the way characters see each other. If Charlie really has been away for a long time, He can't expect everyone to simply return to the past. That is where the emotional heart of the theory could become much stronger. Charlie may return, but the old version of Hudson and Rex may not return with him. The team has changed, Mark has changed, Rex has changed, and Charlie himself may have changed. That gives the writers a chance to tell something much bigger than a simple comeback story. It becomes a story about whether people can find their way back to each other after everything has changed. And then comes the biggest possibility of all. What if Charlie's return is connected to the main case of Season 9? Instead of appearing simply for nostalgia, Charlie could arrive because something dangerous is happening. Maybe he has information the team needs. Maybe someone from his past has returned. Maybe the case Mark is investigating is connected to the reason Charlie disappeared. Suddenly, the new detective and the old detective would have no choice but to work together. And that could create one of the most unusual partnerships the series has ever explored. Mark knows the current team, Charlie knows the history, Rex knows both of them. 3 different perspectives, 1 dangerous case, and 1 question hanging over everything. Can they trust each other? That could turn Season 9 into something much more emotional than fans expect. But there is still one problem. What if the rumored return isn't real at all? What if the trailer is designed to make viewers believe Charlie is coming back? What if the mysterious figure is someone else? What if the voice fans think belongs to Charlie is actually part of a flashback? What if Rex's reaction is connected to a memory? That possibility has to be taken seriously. Television has used these tricks for decades. A character appears to return only for the audience to discover that the moment happened in a dream, a flashback, or a carefully designed misdirection. And that's why a supposed leaked trailer should never automatically be treated as proof. Until there is an official confirmation, Charlie's return remains a theory. An exciting theory, a highly emotional theory, but still a theory. And honestly, that uncertainty is what makes the possibility so fascinating. Because right now, fans can imagine almost anything. Maybe Charlie returns for 1 episode, maybe he returns for several episodes. Maybe he never appears at all, or maybe the writers are preparing a surprise that nobody sees coming. And if John Reardon really does step back into the role of Charlie Hudson, the reaction could be enormous. Because this wouldn't just be another guest appearance, it would be a reunion between a detective and the dog who helped define his story. It would also be a test for Mark Hudson, and it could become one of the biggest emotional moments in the show's history. But perhaps the most powerful part of the entire theory is something much simpler. Charlie and Rex mattered. That relationship mattered to the audience. And even if the series continues with Mark, the history between Charlie and Rex will always be part of the show's identity. So if Charlie does return, the writers don't need to pretend the past never happened. They can embrace it. They can use it. They can make the past collide with the present. And that is where Season 9 could become truly unpredictable. Because maybe the real question isn't whether Charlie Hudson comes back. Maybe the real question is this. If Charlie comes back, will Rex still be the same dog who waited for him? And if Rex has changed, Charlie will have to change too. That's what could make the reunion so powerful. Not a simple reset, not a quick cameo, but 2 old partners meeting again and realizing that neither of them is exactly the same anymore. For now, though, there is no confirmed evidence that John Reardon is returning as Charlie Hudson. So, take every trailer rumor, fan theory, and supposed leak with caution. But if that first unmistakable moment ever arrives, if Rex suddenly hears a familiar voice, if Mark turns around and sees someone he never expected to see again, and if Charlie Hudson finally steps back into the story, Season 9 could instantly become one of the most talked about chapters of Hudson and Rex. So now the question goes to you. Do you want Charlie Hudson back? Or do you think Mark Hudson has already earned his place beside Rex? Because if Charlie really is coming back, the biggest question may not be whether Rex recognizes him. It may be whether Rex chooses him.